Call Mr. Jim Allister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I commend Mr. McCrossan for his very compelling speech. I look forward in a few minutes' time holding the no door open for him as he votes against this wholly inadequate budget. Let's see. Mr. Speaker, when I lift up this budget bill and turn to page 1, it's hard to escape the huge figure that appears there for our resources. 28,817,000,000. It's good to be British, Mr. Speaker, but it's never enough. That could say 38 billion. And there are members in this House who would be demanding more, particularly in the Sinn Féin benches, who are past experts at spending everyone else's money. And that is, in fact, their raison d'etre, so that they can forever blame the Brits. There's not enough money, blame the Brits. And sadly, there have been echoes of that from some in the unionist benches, and the DUP who've joined in their own Brit bashing on the money front. But here we are, back in Stormont, on the foot off a package which the members in this House accepted as the way forward. They bought the package. I'm sure we're all familiar with the Latin phrase, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. But were they? No. They bought 3.3 billion as the way of getting the keys to this House. And they're not through the door till they're demanding more and more and more. And of course there's some of them who, as I say, that's the only purpose for which they exist. Because you could never acknowledge that being a part of the United Kingdom is financially beneficial or anything like it. So, you do have to own what you bought into. So, yes.
He mentioned, great for giving away, he mentioned being part of the UK is financially beneficial. Does he agree with the UK's official budget fiscal and economic forecaster, the OBR, which says that Brexit basically has reduced the UK's trading capacity and therefore its economy and GDP by about 4% in the long run, which obviously means much less tax revenue, which means much less money to spend on public services, including in Northern Ireland?
But let's be very clear. I hear it all the time in this House. Tory austerity and those terrible Brits who do these terrible things to us. Well, it's been pointed out tonight, this is a budget which builds in those cuts. These are now Sinn Féin cuts. It's Sinn Féin which is now taking ownership of the denuding of our education service, of our health service, and everything that goes with it. So let's have a bit of honesty in this House about where we are. There's no point in the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister going up and speaking in front of impressionable 4-year-olds in a play school and equally impressionable BBC journalists and beating their chests about we'll not have water rates, we'll not increase rates, we'll not do this, we'll not do anything, when they accepted the very deal where the rubber's going to hit the road. The Fiscal Council has told you, and anyone would have known it, that there's a cliff edge to this £3.3 billion. And this is an executive which is trying to blame everyone but themselves, and they're the people who bought into this. If they hadn't enough money, and if it mattered to them, then why are they here? They'd have been holding out. Indeed, some of them, of course, would be here for no money. £3, never mind 3 billion would have done them. Such was their anxiety to be here and to take ownership of Tory austerity, as they do tonight. And then, of course, when we look at the challenges coming down the road, former Finance Minister of this House tells us in today's Belfast newsletter that the climate change bill, which this House previously approved, is going to impose a charge of £2.3 billion. £2.3 billion. Was any of that factored in to these wonderful negotiations? This House committed itself in its folly to all sorts of expenditures arising from a target of net zero greenhouse emissions by 2050, with a reduction of at least 48% in net emissions by 2030. Climate Change Commissioner has to be appointed. A public body to be set up to scrutinise changes. Something else called a Just Transition Commission. It's all going to cost phenomenal amount of money. Where was the negotiation to get that money? Where is that money coming from? It's all very well, and we had it so much at the end of the last Assembly, to let's push through all these populist measures, all these populist private members' bill, but never cost them. Never worry where the money's coming from. Of course, that is the typical Sinn Féin approach. In fact, the less money you have, the better, because the more you can blame the Brits. And that is the mentality of this minister and her party in this House. So, as we go forward, Mr. Speaker, I think we're going to see more of the dysfunctionalism of this executive. Indeed, we had a classic example of it last week. We had the Education Minister come to this House to make his first statement. Now, we might have been here, but he wasn't talking to us. He was making a presentation, a plea to his executive colleagues, to the Finance Minister, setting out that he needed 500, 600, I can't remember exactly, £1 million to fix certain things. He wasn't coming to make an announcement, as you would expect from an executive minister. This is what I've got, this is what I'm going to do with it, and this is how I'm going to fix it. No, he was coming to this House to address the Finance Minister and the executive colleagues in his own bids for his own department. And that is classic dysfunctionalism of this executive. And we're only beginning to see it, and we will see it more and more as they make those silo presentations. But what this comes down to tonight is a budget which has locked in the cuts to date, thereby the title deeds of those cuts have been transferred from the wicked Secretary of State to the Finance Minister of Sinn Féin, and that's where the ownership now lies. And that's where the ownership will lie going forward. And when public sector workers and others find disappointment in what they're given, when our schools continue to be short of finance, then let's put the blame where it belongs. On this executive and on its Sinn Féin in particular, who hold all the key economic posts. And this is what they serve up to us tonight. Little wonder a minority of us refused to vote for such a thing.
Jerry Carroll. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've already said today that the process we're asked to endorse